Hi, this is Lori Lieberman, and my new album, The Berlin Sessions, will be coming out in the fall. And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. In late 2023, here in Raleigh, North Carolina, the new owners of a classic George Matsumoto designed modernist house took out a demolition permit. Usually, that's the end of the road, but Melinda and Andy Knowles stepped up and persuaded the owners to delay demolition so that they could move the house 7 miles across town. Now the house has been wonderfully restored on a new site next to their existing mid-century modernist house. We'll get the inside story on that move today on the show. Then we'll talk with architect and author James Biber, who has produced one of the best and funniest architectural books of the year. Finally, we'll meet pie aficionado and jazz vocalist, our musical guest, Allegra Levy. And now, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. If there was a Medal of Honor for modernism, I'd give it to today's guests, Melinda and Andy Knowles. It's not for the meek to take on moving a house 7 miles through a busy town. You've got to coordinate disassembly, transport, moving phone lines, getting police escorts, all going live at 5 a.m. on a weekend to avoid traffic. Plus, months of getting the appropriate city permits and permissions, arranging financing, and prepping the site for a new arrival. Moving a house is just no small feat. It requires careful planning, precision engineering, and really a touch of madness. If you've always dreamed of being a real-life MacGyver, this is the way to go, because there are always interesting twists and turns and problems with a move. The project completed this fall, and it was a lot of work. But like childbirth, I'm told, you forget the pain after a while. And a few years later, you want to do it again. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of modern Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
For the last 25 years, architect James Biber has designed projects such as the 2015 USA Pavilion in Milan, the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee, oceanfront homes in the Hamptons, the set from The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and various buildings at MIT. He's been published in The New York Times, Architectural Record, Architectural Digest, Interiors, The Wall Street Journal, New York Magazine, and many more. His new book is called The Architect and Designer Birthday Book, and it is that rare combination of unusual information and hilarious commentary that started out as a pandemic-created Instagram account. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Thank you.
James, you grew up in New Rochelle, New York, the home of a famous TV character.
Absolutely. You know, when I was growing up, I was watching the Dick Van Dyke Show, and it was always a thrill. I think it was because Carl Reiner lived in New Rochelle that New Rochelle was the site. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because at the time, you know, TV was in New York. That kind of TV was in New York.
And New Rochelle, for those of you that don't know, it's what, like 30 minutes north of the city, roughly?
Exactly.
It's
a real bedroom suburb. Exactly. Yeah.
And did architecture find you at that point, or was that later?
Architecture didn't really find me at that point. You know, it's a fairly typical American suburb. When I'm in other suburbs, I think, oh, I just sort of grew up in one just like this. West Coast, East Coast, they all sort of blend together. But it wasn't until I went to college and I was studying biology, and it didn't take me more than a year to realize that wasn't for me. I saw kind of organic chemistry coming down the pike, and I thought, I should do something else. And I happened to have, I know. And so I happened to have a copy of the newly published book on the Bauhaus, the one that MIT Press published in, 67, 68, whatever it was. And I spent the entire winter in an extremely snowy, cold winter going through that book and realized when I got through it, like, oh, maybe I should try this. And so I happened to be at a school where there was also an architecture school, and it fit.
In reading through your book, which is organized by 365 entries, it is indeed a birthday book. There is an entry for each date. Now, I assume that in some cases you had competition for these dates. So how did you decide when there were 2 or 5 people with the same birthday?
Well, the opposite problem was actually more of a problem because there are some days when simply no one had the good graces to be born that day. Well, no one interesting, but it was always a question of who I wanted to write about. So, it was a tough one between Jean Prouvé and Richard Neutra. It was a not such a tough one between Paul Escher and Le Corbusier, but this happened all the time. It was more a question of who I had something interesting to say about or who interested me than how famous they were or not so famous. But it also turned out that I have an opinion, as it turns out, about just about everything.
You do, indeed.
Including things I don't know much about. And so
that
it was pretty easy.
No reason to stop there.
We have a little club where we discuss movies we haven't yet seen. So it's along the same lines.
I love that. Well, one birthday in particular, very personal to you and explains somewhat of your crazy mind, is March 23rd. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it does. It does, in fact. Yeah. So this was an opportunity to kind of share things about people I know, people I work with. And March 23rd is my mother. And she was an art director and a graphic designer, worked for Herb Leballin and others of fame. And, I grew up in a house in New Rochelle filled with Danish modern furniture, a womb chair. I think I may have even said at one point that I knew what a womb chair was before I knew what a womb was. And so I was completely surrounded by this. And of course, I hated this style as soon as I got out and kind of was trying to develop my own style. And of course, now I love every bit of it and have nearly all of those pieces sitting in my home.
Mm. Well, the article about your mom is very touching
about
how she influenced you. It really is lovely.
It's impossible to know how these things are going to affect you until much later. But it's true. I didn't know that other people weren't growing up in environments that were highly designed and filled with all sorts of walnut Danish modern. But it did influence me, as did the school I went to, the woman I married, the firm I eventually became a partner in, Pentagram. And it was always a different field of kind of creative endeavor that really affected me the most. Graphic designers, furniture designers, lighting designers. And so architecture was kind of the big tent for all of those.
I grew up with someone in your book.
Did you?
I grew up with November 16th.
Hold on.
Alexander Isley.
Alexander Isley?
Yes.
Really? Well, Alex is a friend.
Well, he's not only a friend, his father and my father were partners.
You're both architects. Right.
And
where was that?
In Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And also Alexander rebranded our website a year ago, which looks fantastic now.
Did Alex grow up in Raleigh? In Raleigh?
In Durham, yes.
Oh, in Durham. I had no idea. He lives in Connecticut now. He seems to fit right in. So
yeah.
Who knew?
I was born in Connecticut, moved to Durham, so there.
Well, there you go. There's a pipeline. It's back and forth.
Yep.
It's a balance, I suppose.
It's I-95.
When we do events in New Canaan, which we do a couple times a year, Alex always comes over and says hello, and he did a wonderful job on our website, making it more up to date.
He gives away these fantastic gifts every year.
Yes.
And for a long time, they were based on architects' templates, and they were either templates custom cut to be humorous things or something in the form of a template. But yeah, he's always had that side. I knew his father was an architect, but that's really remarkable.
He had a Fuller brush, I think, one year, a real actual Fuller brush.
Yep.
He gave away.
I think there might have been a stapler one year, like a swingline stapler. And they were kind of elementary tools of utility, I think.
And there was kind of a handball thing one year, a super bouncy ball.
Oh, man.
Really, really unique Christmas gifts that he would give out. I would always look forward every year to what was coming in the mail.
He's a very clever guy, and he actually went to school with my wife. He went to Cooper, and he's one of those people that has an amazing sense of humor. And that is always, to me, a huge plus. There's a lot of very serious architectural histories and very serious graphic design histories.
Oh, man.
But, they tend to be, they're kind of self-serious. For a long time, I thought that architects spend a lot of time kind of obfuscating their work in order to make it seem more elevated, more important, more difficult to understand. When I always thought, well, the opposite's a much better idea. It should be accessible, legible, open to all, in my view.
I always love on architects' websites where they make it sound like they invented this principle that you should have a site match its surroundings. Like that was their idea. They came up with it first.
Or every building is built for a particular site and person. I know it's they're kind of tired tropes, but it's part of the reason that when I go to see people speak, the thing I'm really interested in is not their kind of philosophical background that they want to talk about, but how they make things. The anecdotal history of how things are made to me is really fascinating, because everyone who makes anything, whether it's designing products or architecture or even writing a book or a screenplay or making a movie, there are things that are in common among all of these kind of creative trades, painters, sculptors, about making things. And you can recognize, oh, right, I kind of go through the same thing when I'm making things. And that to me is the most valuable part of these talks.
Alex Isley is a funny guy, and you are too.
Thank you.
In one of these entries about a particular architect, it says, it pays for an architect to be collaborative, elegant, and soigné?
Soigné?
Soigné.
Is that like suave?
Yeah, suave, sort of suave.
Yeah.
But sounds fancier than suave.
Yeah.
It's suave.
That's right up there with fenestration.
Right.
Is that Robert Malley Stevens? Who is that?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, yeah, good.
And the rest of your quote is, oh, and rich. That helps too. It does help for an architect to be rich, doesn't it?
It helps a lot. One of my partners at Pentagram, this guy Colin Forbes, had a horse farm in Westfield, North Carolina, and he once said, and I'm sure this quote has come through lots of different ways for lots of different professions. He said, the best way to make a lot of money with a horse farm is to start with a lot more money. And I think it's true of architects. It's true of architects as well. It's like, and remember that architects were once not a profession but a kind of art, and they were. The profession wasn't open to people who were not connected to the clientele. And the clientele was, the richest people and the church and so on. And so it was critical to be connected. And then it was also nice to have talent.
I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of architecture books. And this one, by far, is one of the best I've ever read, because on each day, you have a couple of paragraphs about a person and their work. And then you have a little James Biber commentary, usually in the last paragraph, about them. Sometimes funny, sometimes you're saying things that really have needed to be said for a while. For instance, June 8th, Bruce Goff, famous organic architect. Mm-hmm. You talk about that, his accusations of being gay when you couldn't be gay at all in the 40s and 50s. It was so uncomfortable that he left the university and went into private practice. And you say that he does seem to be owed a posthumous apology. And that's right on.
I believe he may have gotten a kind of a half apology, or at least is it University of Oklahoma? Is that where he ended up, I think? Mm-hmm. Do I have that right? They actually, on their website, I think there's a letter that they might be publishing in order to kind of try to dispel this notion that he was pushed out. I believe, of course, he was pushed out. And I also believe that the university is trying to do their best to take the stain of that away. But, it's not just my personal, architecture is almost always written about in the absence of the society at large or the culture at large. I mean, it's written as a kind of standalone art, and it can respond to technology, or it can respond to the zeitgeist, but not the kind of political, social, cultural kind of movements that are going on. And people are routinely forgotten. One of the things I found about doing this book is how difficult it is to balance men and women, people of color and white people, Westerners and Easterners. It's like history is written by and for, it seems, people like me. And so finding people that aren't like me is actually much more difficult than you'd think.
It is.
And that's a shame. And I hope that the next several editions, it only gets better and better. But it is a problem. And the publisher was, sensitive to this and said, wherever possible, we can't change history, but wherever possible, it's a good idea to remind people that lots of people were architects, lots of people were designers, not just the usual suspects.
Well, that's what makes it a much more interesting book, is that it's not the usual suspects.
Right.
Always.
Right.
And
Right.
it's an interesting construct that sort of forces you to go look around for somebody who's got an odd birthday that nobody else was born on.
Right. Well, and February 29th, of course, was the most difficult.
Oh, yeah.
For obvious reasons, because, it's a quarter, you're down to 25% of the typical day. And I had originally chosen Balthus, the painter Balthus, as February 29th, except he was such a unreconstructed pedophile. I mean, the guy was just an awful, awful human being. And so that was what it was about. That's what I wrote about.
Yeah.
But the publisher said, I'm sure we could find somebody else. And I did. And the person who we found was a woman, B, a woman of color, and a really terrific overlook sculptor.
Oh, good.
I remember when I was doing the book, and I did it on Instagram, as you say. So every day I was posting something, and I would try to do them a couple of days in advance, but essentially I was doing it on the fly. And I got to Albert Speer's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Albert Speer was Hitler's architect. He wrote Inside the Third Reich. And so I wrote in the first line, as I always did, Happy Birthday, Albert Speer. And then I went on to say that this was the most, how can I put it, an unapologetic Nazi till the day he died.
Yeah.
And then it's very odd that his son, Albert Speer Jr., had a very big practice in Germany. So I went on to say all of this. And my son immediately texted me and said, you can't do that. I said, well, what? He said, you can't have Albert Speer as today's birthday. And I said, well, why not? I go on to say what he is. He said, nobody reads that. Everybody's going to read, all that people will read is Happy Birthday, Albert Speer.
Oh.
I strongly suggest you take that down. And I did.
Okay.
He was right.
A wise choice.
Who is your favorite birthday?
Well, I was going to say my own, but that's such a great question. I love all my birthdays equally. You know how it is with children.
He's a grandpa.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the truth is the people I didn't know about were almost more fascinating than the people I did, because it's very tough to find something new to say about Le Corbusier or Richard Neutra or Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's much more interesting to find something interesting to say about John Lloyd Wright, who invented Lincoln Logs and wrote a remarkable biography of his father I think it's called My Father Who Is on Earth. And he did this thing where when he wrote the biography, he sent it to his father for comments, and he got a long list of comments back from Frank Lloyd Wright. By the way, John Lloyd Wright's middle name was not Lloyd when he was born. Frank Lloyd Wright made him change it. So you can kind of get a sense of the level of control. Yeah, true. And so he took all of the notes that his father made and he made them marginalia. He put them as notes from his father so that he had the original text
Take this,
and
Dad.
the notes. And I thought, what a brilliant way to both, well, I just included you. No, I mean, it's a perfectly innocent thing, but
I absorbed what you
idea.
said. Yeah,
yes, exactly. So much so that I wanted to feature it separately. So in a way, that's a much more interesting biography, a much more interesting thing to write about than Frank Lloyd Wright. And I think Bruce Goff and Frank Lloyd Wright actually share a birthday, which is funny.
One of the people that I didn't know anything about was March 31st, William Golden.
Oh, yeah.
Who was the designer for the CBS Eye, which has been in use now, some 75 years at least?
More or less unchanged. I mean, it is one of those marks, and they are so rare, a mark that lasts that long, because it is so spectacularly perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it is such a kind of, and CBS, Bill Paley and Stanton, these were tremendous design aficionados. They hired Eero Saarinen to design the headquarters, the building in New York, Black Rock. They filled it with his furniture. They really were, and they were the Tiffany network. So they were the kind of high-tone network. William Golden was just a remarkable guy. It was married to, I think, Sippy Pinnells, who was another remarkable graphic designer, absolutely remarkable. But it is nice that you didn't know about him, and it's nice that, I mean, every graphic designer does, but it's great that people get to learn where these things come from. These are all designed things, right?
I like that you're so matter-of-fact about things that are obvious but are just rarely mentioned in these glowing biographies of people. Like, for instance, July 28th, Santiago Calatrava.
Yeah.
One of our favorites, because I like to tell people that I graduated from the Calatrava Institute of On Time and On Budget. I was the only graduate.
So run now.
Yes, right. Calatrava, for those of you that don't know, world-famous architect, done bridges and buildings and museums all over the world, notorious for cost overruns, big cost overruns. And I think there are a couple of documentaries on him, and one of them I love, where he's called on the carpet by some group of executives about the cost overruns. And he comes in and he's all smiles and he goes up to the board and he draws some things. He talks about the poetry of the site and then he just walks out. And they're just left right where they were.
If only we had learned that trick. No, it is absolutely astonishing to think, this is the kind of, it's not, failing upward is not fair. I mean, he's an interesting and talented architect
Absolutely.
and engineer, but the idea that, the Oculus downtown in Manhattan, I think the overrun was over $1 billion. I mean, it's a $4 billion mall and transit hub. I don't know how someone could do more than one building with those sorts of cost overruns and time overruns. But he is, the story about going in and doing a bunch of drawings, apparently when he designed the extension to the Milwaukee Museum of Art, it's pretty much what he did. He came in with an easel and blank pages and he drew the building in front of them while talking about it. And they still have those framed drawings in the wing that he built. But it must be so overwhelming to see that happen that they were willing to overspend.
So, James, there's a book that came out a number of years ago I wonder if you've seen, because I think it's a wonderful companion to this new book. This book in 2017 was called Architects' Grave Sites, a Serendipitous Guide. So you could have the grave sites and the birthdays as a dual set.
I guess next is Death Days. I guess you're right.
Right.
It's like one of the things that I also realized that, this happened 3 or 4 weeks ago. Ken Grange, a former partner of mine at Pentagram, industrial designer, one of the founders, turned 95. And I sent him the book because he's in the book. I sent him the book to celebrate his 95th birthday. And, 4 days later, he died. And I thought, oh, does that mean I have to go back now and start editing these into the past tense? And then I realized, wait, everybody in this book at some point is going to be past tense.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure.
Well, when I go, I want you to write my obit because this book is just amazing, and I have so much enjoyed it.
I'll write it in advance. Massimo Vignelli told Massimo. There's a story about Massimo going to the head of, actually to Steve Heller, who was the head of the book review at the New York Times, but who would write design obituaries, and he said to Steve, I want to see. I know you write these things in advance. I just want to proofread it. I want to fact check it. That's all I want to do. I just want to see it. And he kept persisting, and Steve constantly rebuffed him. And I was talking to him on another podcast, and he said, well, the truth was there was no obit for Massimo written in advance. He just wasn't important enough, but I didn't feel like I wanted to tell him that. So George, we'll write yours in advance.
Okay, I am honored.
You get full editing rights.
It's like people who want to be in the wings at their own funeral.
Right.
Fake their death so they can see what people say about them.
Well, and Massimo came as close as he could because he designed everything about the funeral. The cube his ashes were in, the layout of the table. It was in a building that he designed, a church that he designed. The number of speakers, the order of the speakers, the music. I mean, it was absolutely choreographed. And some people never like to give up control.
My mother-in-law had rehearsals for her funeral to the point where she even went down to the church and lay down on a table.
No.
It's true. It's Patricia's mom. A wonderful
she gave
woman.
Notes to people.
Yes.
Notes to people who worked properly.
It's a crazy. I married into a crazy family.
The book is The Architect and Designer Birthday Book. James, thank you so much for speaking with us. This is wonderful.
George, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much as well.
Melinda and Andrew Knowles were just settling into retirement when a modernist opportunity came knocking: the imminent destruction of George Matsumoto's Weber House in Raleigh. Already owners of their second modernist residence in Raleigh, North Carolina, they decided to move the Matsumoto house to an empty lot adjacent to their existing modernist house 7 miles away. That's not an easy process, and it took months to arrange, but they pulled together a great team, and much of that Matsumoto house has been saved. They're here with us today. Welcome, Melinda and Andy.
Hi, thanks.
Welcome. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you guys here because you are local heroes to the modernist preservation community.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure you get told that all the time.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
nearly enough.
That is, yeah, very generous.
So let's start with your origin story. How did the two of you meet?
Oh, wow.
How did we meet?
Yeah, like
Oh,
We both worked for Delta Airlines in Atlanta, Georgia.
okay. What were you doing? Were you flying the planes? Were you serving the drinks? What were you doing?
We were both in the tech department, IT. We had been hired as trainee programmers. Back in the day, they would hire people to teach them how to program the reservation system.
Okay.
And so we both signed up for that job, and they taught us most everything we needed to know to perform it.
Were you like in some ancient language like Fortran or COBOL or?
BAL. I was BAL. Melinda was more of a natural language, I think.
it
Okay.
was kind of like COBOL, but that sounds so boring. We really met in a bar with work people, and he was dating my best friend at the time, and it's kind of
Now we're
sort of
getting the
tale.
story,
Yeah.
Andy.
We have nerd love going on here. Okay.
But we kind of met and knew each other a little bit for 7 years, but we never dated. By the time we did date, we dated for 2 weeks. He asked me to get married. We got married 3 weeks later. So
Wow.
we are kind of impulsive that way, and that has carried through our marriage.
Unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty fortunate. You guys are now serial modernists. You know, you realize when you get to number 3, it's a pattern,
Oh, I like that.
right?
Yeah. They do miniseries about you.
Yeah. On the History Channel.
Yeah, right. This,
So what was your first modernist house and how did you decide to buy it?
would you even think the one in Atlanta kind of was?
It was kind of. It was a ranch that had been
It was a 50s ranch.
remodeled and had a lot of mirrors and stuff in it, and it was very nice. We got used to living on one level there for sure.
And
But-
yeah,
I'd say our first one really was the Granville House,
yeah. Which
That's
is,
on Granville Drive in Raleigh, Country Club Hills.
right? Designed by Life
Valland.
Valland.
Yeah,
Life Valland?
I never know how to pronounce it, but yes. And how did we decide to buy it? Was again super impulsive. We were living in 5 Points in a great little bungalow that we loved, and we had 3 kids at the time, and we thought maybe we need something with a bigger yard, and so we looked online just to see what was out there, and this house came up, and I said, well, I'll just go look at it real quick. I don't know. And I walked in the front door, and I don't know if you've ever been in the house, but it had that, great compression release, really low foyer, not even standard height front doors, and you go in, and then the whole house opened up with a giant window that looked out to this just beautiful setting. And that minute right there is when I called Andy and said, okay, this is it. This is the only house we looked at, and we both just flipped out over it, and we haven't looked back. I mean, living, so connected to the outdoors is just a really wonderful way to live.
When was that?
Yeah, when did you move into that?
That was 2002.
2002, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you lived there for the next, 20 years?
18
18?
until
Well, when did we buy the house?
2020.
Okay.
2020. So, yeah.
And so house number 2 is really interesting origins because it was done by an employee of NC State School of Design, but he wasn't an architect.
No, his name is Jack Bost, and we understand that he ran the design lab at NC State for many years. So he apparently, by all accounts, was a character. One of the things that we got from his sons that we bought the house from was a picture of him in an airplane hangar with this very modernistic look rocket ship-like small airplane that he built allegedly in the garage of the house we bought on Delmont Drive.
Yeah.
Did this thing ever fly? Did you find that part out?
We
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
that
yeah.
he flew it regularly.
Okay. That's cool.
But apparently
you're listening.
he survived all that
Yeah,
and lived
sorry.
into his 90s.
Yeah, architects live a long time.
Is that?
They do.
Wow.
Okay.
I don't know if it's something about the creative process, but they tend to stick around much longer than other professions I'm seeing.
Well, Matsumoto is a great example of that.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
And this guy wasn't even an architect, right?
No, he worked in the shop and did a lot of support functions within the School of Design at NC State, and just kind of absorbed all this during this heyday that was going on in Raleigh at the time, built his own place.
Sure. And we have the original drawings that were in the house and of the house. And the story for that is that they were drawn by his son, Beau, his younger son, Beau, who I think was 14 years old at the time.
Well, he's definitely a homegrown guy if he's building his own planes and houses and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of subscriber Popular Mechanics wants.
Right.
Mail away for these plans.
Right. I saw the sign outside, convert your station wagon into a submarine. It's great.
Oh, yeah. That's right. From an old postcard series that we did. Yep.
But,
okay, so now, 2022, how did you get onto this Matsumoto house thing?
Was it Labor Day?
Labor Day weekend.
weekend.
We have a little cabin up in the mountains, and we were there, and somebody sent me the Instagram article about they were tearing down the Weber house. And, it's down the street from the house that we had before, and we had both always loved it. And, of course, you always are scouting out the other modernist houses in the neighborhood, and many in that neighborhood were torn down in the 18 years that we lived there. And this was, just a favorite. So we both, just thought, oh my gosh, that's just a shame. And we had thought before about what were we going to do with the lot beside our house. And we had thought about moving another modernist house that was in Country Club Hills that was torn down. So we had looked into it before, but that one was all built on a slab. And by the time we tried to connect with the developer that had bought the house, they just didn't respond. They weren't interested. So that didn't work out. So it wasn't completely impulsive. We had thought of it before.
Somewhat. We had gone through the idea, and we'd run into Wolf Movers at the time and talked to them about whether we could do it then.
This is the specialty house moving firm.
Yeah.
Right.
So we knew that it was kind of possible. Anyway, it just... Once we thought of it, we couldn't unthink it. It really has a very similar look to the house that we live in now. And we just could both see how great it would look on that lot right next door to ours. What else could we possibly do that would be as cool as that? And also, how much could it possibly cost to pick up a house
that old
and
question,
move it?
how hard could it be?
Right,
hard could that
exactly.
be?
I mean, I was retired. I just retired the spring of last year. And so we thought, well, this would be a good project to take on.
Yeah.
And surely it'll take a while, but, we don't know yet how long it'll take. But we had the time, and we had the inclination. We still don't know if we have the funds to complete the project, but we hope we do. We're still hoping we do.
Yeah.
And things are moving along in a good direction. So, but it did turn out to be a lot more complicated than we'd first thought. It's not just as simple as hiring somebody to jack it up, put it on a truck, and move it across the city. So
what were some of the complications you ran into?
Well, the first one was that, like the other house we'd looked at, part of the house we discovered was on a slab. So it's basically a split-level house, and the middle level was built on a slab, and the lower level was very simple. It's just a carport with a storage shed behind it originally, and then the whole bedroom unit was above the carport. And so we thought that was something we could just pick it up. And we talked to the folks at Wolf Building Moving Company, and they said that they thought they could actually pick up the two top levels together. There's some way they could stick I-beams all the way through and into the part that was on the slab and bolt the post of that structure onto the I-beams and then cut them off at the slab, lift the whole two pieces up together and move them through the city. But we went down that route a little ways, and then it turned out that the profile of the house moving through intersections was just going to be really big. It was going to be over 40 feet wide and over 25 feet high.
And you had to go about 7 miles?
And we had to go about 7 miles. So we thought, well, sure, we'll just go down Glenwood and hop on the belt line and go around that. That should be simple.
That's a local joke right there.
But that's the interstate that runs around Raleigh, and it turns out that the DOT won't permit that. And so we talked about that for a little bit, and then we talked to the city historic development team in the city of Raleigh, and they said, well, we can help you figure out clearance to run through the city streets. But, that turned out to be whole nother complicated endeavor. And we figured that it was going to be too much to try to move
the whole thing.
So we came up with an abbreviated plan, which would basically just take the bedrooms and the bath portion of the house and cut off the rest of it, take all the recognizable portions of the part that we left behind and save them so we could put them back in a rebuild version of that section of the house.
I was there the morning that this was all occurring, and what was really prominent were the number of police and utility bucket trucks. Why all of those?
Well, it's apparently required. Who would have thought? But, not only are they required, but you have to pay for them. And so, there's, I think, 6 police officers from the Raleigh department were out there at 4:30 in the morning on the day of the move.
Did you bring donuts?
Melinda's got all. It wasn't just donuts.
Listen, but one of the funny things about getting the bucket trucks and the police is that the police, this was down to the wire like the day before when they said, well, you have to have the police escort, and they are going to be off-duty policemen that just do this as an extra gig, and you have to pay them. And so they had said the standard rate is whatever it was. I forgot. So they posted it as we're looking for volunteers. Well, nobody signed up, and it's the day before. And so we're like, what do we do? We don't have police. Well, you can't go if you don't have the police. You might have to double the offer. Somebody will probably take it then. And so we had to double the offer, and sure enough, we got some volunteers. So,
yeah.
But that was so last minute of all the little details.
And so this giant piece of house is rolling through the streets on a Saturday morning.
Yep.
Through some small streets, really. I mean, I was surprised what you got it through.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge was the neighborhood streets on the beginning at the very end.
At the end.
Yep. Yeah. But, Wolf has these amazing machines where they can build basically a trailer underneath whatever the structure is and put these dollies underneath it that are all automated.
They're robotic.
They're robotic. They can lift. They can turn independently. And so, each one of them was powered. There was one point in the drive where we're going up a hill very soon after we turned off of Glenwood onto Glen Eden, and the tractor trailer was towing the house. Just the wheels started to spin, and I was freaking out at that point.
Yeah.
But they said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll just unhook the truck, and the
robots will take it the rest of the way, right?
We'll roll it on up the hill."
Yeah.
And they did.
Really?
That's amazing.
So it's a combination of. I mean, I think we really benefited from having the expertise of a lot of people that had worked on these projects. I think they come along infrequently, but there are people that know how to do it in the area. And I guess, for the power companies, we had to get Duke Energy trucks. We had to get communication company trucks to go along to lift up their lines as we went underneath them. But they've all done that for other reasons, and they knew what to do, and they showed up, and it went off without a hitch, really.
Mm-hmm. And you ended up next door to your current house where they planted this for a while, and then you've built a foundation to put it on.
Yes. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get the building permit before we did the move. The move was kind of scheduled to be late January because we'd had an agreement that we could move it up through the end of January, but there was no guarantee that we could still have access to the house and do it after January. And so we had scheduled the move for the 20th, and it turned out that we couldn't get the building permit through the process. If we had the building permit before, maybe 2 weeks in advance, then the plan would have been to put the footers in where it was actually going to sit, and then move the building right over that, raise it up on huge supports, the crisscross railroad ties basically to support it for a matter of weeks, and they'd build the foundation up to it. but we didn't have the building permit, so we had to set it down, like you said, off to the side, and then we did all that permitting and building process. And they came back a second time to do this miraculous slide-over move where they moved it across I-beams directly over the new foundation and lowered it onto the foundation.
You didn't need the cops and the bucket truck people for the second move.
This was a much quieter exercise.
Yeah.
But it was very exciting and interesting to see.
Yeah, it was super. That was a really exciting piece of the whole thing, is to see this house, up in the air just sliding across, and nobody was there. It was just us sitting out in our lawn chairs, and so it was interesting.
Now, you've told me that you anticipate this being some kind of Airbnb when it's finished?
That's our plan.
That's the plan?
Yeah.
So people can stay there?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
We hope they will.
Yeah. I know this is a loaded question, but what's your current estimate as to when it's going to be done?
Last week, he said he still thinks before the end of the summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Apparently, this is the builder, who is saying the foundation for the part that we had to rebuild is pretty much finished now, and they're going to start the flooring system this week. So he says the rest of it goes up pretty quick. It's really just one big space.
Okay.
And then we already have all the cabinetry from the original house that we're going to put in it. So in theory, it's going to go up pretty quick from here. We'll see.
That is really exciting.
Yeah.
Now, did you, in the process of planning for this, did you talk with any other people who had moved houses?
Did we ever talk? We did talk to a guy who moved one in Bahama.
Okay.
Andy talked to him.
Don Defoe?
Yes, we talked to Don Defoe, who now lives in Mexico, but we were able to connect with him and had a nice call with him to talk about his process.
He moved to Matsumoto House, 20 years ago, roughly?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. A long move,
Very long move.
Longer than ours, but I don't think there was many intersections.
I think he moved his on Highway 70. He was on that main stretch going over to Durham from Raleigh.
Okay, right.
But they were up, if you're familiar with Raleigh, folks, there's a big shopping center called Crabtree Valley, and above that is a kind of giant hill. And this Matsumoto house was on that hill on Arrow Drive. So it was kind of a pain to get it down the hill. But once they got it down, it was pretty easy to get it over to its current location north of Durham.
Right.
Yeah, 70's nice and wide.
Did you see that happen?
I didn't get to see it at the time. We had not started NC Modernist at that point.
Well, we had a former neighbor who knew Don and put us in touch with him. And so it's been amazing, how many people we've met through this process and how many connections we've made. It's really interesting to, there's another Matsumoto house in Country Club Hills. We've met the owners of that house and had the opportunity to tour it. We've met the owners of the Julian house in Chapel Hill.
Right.
And we were able to tour that. And so that's just given us a great feel for the common elements of the houses. And we're going to really focus on that as we rebuild the one section of the house that we've got to rebuild. We also saw the Richter house.
Right.
In Raleigh.
On Churchill.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Which is, very beautiful.
So if you had not bought this house and moved it, what would have happened to it?
It would have been demolished. It would be in a landfill somewhere.
They already had the demolition permit, which is how word got out, I think, that it was coming down. So it was imminent. And, we really do appreciate the new owners for cooperating with us and really delaying their schedule to let us do this because they didn't have to.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
But it's something that's kind of for someone in their position, it's kind of a no-win proposition. If the house has no future in their plans, then it did take a lot of time and effort, and jury's still out on whether it's going to be economically feasible. We hope that it will be, but I think it depends on who you talk to as to how much new houses of comparable quality cost to build in Raleigh these days. But I guess it's going to be around 2,000 square feet when it's rebuilt because we're putting an efficiency apartment underneath it in the back.
Okay,
and so we're adding a little bit of space that way. But it's a small home, and we've heard estimates from $300 to $400 a square foot. So if you take the high end of that, then it could be a bargain still.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just great that people can stay there in the future and experience this.
Yeah.
Because every year or so, there are fewer and fewer Matsumoto houses to actually experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just like there are fewer and fewer Milton Small houses in North Carolina right now.
Yeah. One interesting thing that we've learned recently is in touring the Richter house, it was a similar size house, all one level, with just one master bath. Well, there are 2 baths originally in that house, I think. But the main bath was built so that it could be used from the inside and the outside at the same time.
Oh.
And it was an interesting feature that he designed into the house where there were storage, like a linen closet, that had doors that opened into the bathroom and also into the exterior hallway. So you could have something, I guess, that could be used outside the bathroom, stored in that space, and
Medicine
access it both
cabinet.
sides. Yeah, medicine cabinet, for
Yeah,
example.
but really clever.
And our house has that also. So it's the same kind of idea. It was carried forward by Matsumoto, I guess, in both designs. And it's just very efficient. Overall, it's just a very efficient use of space that you don't see in modern houses that much. There's not as much storage, and so they had to be smart about how they set it up.
One thing I do want to clarify is that Bill Weber, the Weber House, he is officially the architect who designed the house in community with or consultation with George Matsumoto. So I do want to make sure he gets credit also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This has been great, guys, and thank you so much for doing this. I mean, you are local heroes for preservation, and I can't wait to come and visit.
Yeah,
Good.
thanks
We're
so
looking
much for
forward to
having us.
having an open house in the future maybe before the end of the year.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe.
All
And
right.
also, George, thank you for all the connections that you helped us make through this process that were just super helpful all the way
Glad
through.
to.
Yeah.
Glad to.
Jazz singer-songwriter Allegra Levy won first place in the 2020 Great American Song Contest for the anthem Waste My Time. Allegra was also named one of the top 10 Rising Stars jazz vocalists in the 2021 Downbeat Critics Poll. Raised in Connecticut and now based in New York City, she's a graduate of the New England Conservatory of Music. In 2014 and 2015, she also had another cool gig, artist in residence at the legendary Hong Kong Four Seasons Blue Bar. Welcome to the show, Allegra.
Thank you so much. So nice to be here.
So, Allegra, before we talk about music, what's your favorite pie, sweet or savory?
Ooh, probably sweet. I just baked last night a very tart strawberry rhubarb that I must say, pie is one of my claim to fame. So
Yes, you're quite the pie master.
I did not know.
I love it. It's the best dessert.
And if you were to open, say, a pie and jazz cafe, what would you want to call it?
Oh my God, my dream. Oh, I don't know. That's a hard one.
You can think about that as we go along.
Yeah, I'll think about that.
Something works in crust. I don't know.
There you go.
Or a slice of jazz or
Yeah.
Flaky.
In the new Netflix series Hitman, they have a line about pie, right? All pie is good pie.
all pie is good pie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I just watched that actually as well.
And I think from Twin Peaks that had a pie theme going in it.
Oh, yeah.
About FBI agent Dale Cooper and getting that damn good pie at the cafe. There's lots of cultural pie references. We could go on all day, but we're going to talk about your music first of all.
Okay.
So tell me, what was it like to be an artist in residence in Hong Kong? This was
Wow.
10 years ago, before a lot of the unrest had happened.
Yes. And honestly, a lot of it was just starting around there. There were big protests happening when I was there called the Umbrella Revolution for a little while.
That's
but
right.
I was there in 2014. It's crazy. It was 10 years ago, but I was living in New York City and I got this email, it just said, do you want to come to Hong Kong and do this thing? And I was 24 and just ready to go. So I picked up and moved myself over there, and it really opened up my whole life and my mind, and just to really live in and experience another culture and be experiencing the musicians in Hong Kong too, which was very interesting. There were people from all over the world there playing, and there's been some difficulty with the artists now. I think they have fewer gigs as time has gone on, but
Sure.
it's a really vibrant city and scene. And I met my husband there and as well. So it was a really big year for me.
That's a bonus.
Yeah. And
Yes.
we gather you're expecting your second child now.
Yes, I am currently 34 weeks pregnant with a baby boy, and I have a 3-year-old girl. And yeah, they're little products of that Hong Kong experience because my husband is Hong Kong Chinese and German and came back to New York with me after a year. And now we have this very interesting thing in our family. It's good. I think a combined cultures are in the household is the best way to live and raise a family. And
It's interesting.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. Well, we're going to hear from Allegra in this first song, What Are You Doing New Year's Eve? It was written in 1947 by Frank Loesser and recorded by Margaret Whiting right away. It first charted for the Orioles, who I had never heard of, peaking at number 9.
You mean the baseball team?
No, not
Oh.
Baltimore.
Okay.
This is one of those, I think, probably one-hit wonders from that era. And it's been covered by lots of people, very interestingly. The Carpenters, Donny Osmond, Barbra Streisand, Barry Manilow, Steve Perry, Idina Menzel. And here's Allegra with What Are You Doing New Year's Eve?
Maybe it's much too early in the game. But I thought I'd ask you just the same. What are you doing New Year's? New Year's Eve. Wonder whose arms will hold you good and tight when it's exactly 12 o'clock that night. Welcoming in the new year, New Year's Eve. Maybe I'm crazy to suppose I'd never be the one you chose. Out of 1,000 invitations you receive. But in case I stand one little chance, here comes the jackpot ticket in advance. What are you doing New Year's? New Year's Eve. Maybe I'm crazy to suppose I'd ever be the one you chose. Out of 1,000 invitations you receive. But in case I stand one little chance, here comes the jackpot question in advance. What are you doing New Year's? New Year's Eve.
That's gorgeous, Allegra. Wow.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Christmas song now.
Thank you. Yeah, we recorded the album, I think on December 6th of 2023, and we were all in the holiday spirit, and it was hard to avoid that particular Question song, as if it was just kind of a fun thing. And it was originally released as a single, and the label wanted to put it on the whole album from the sessions. So.
Now, among your other claims to fame, you've recently gotten into children's music. You won the John Lennon Songwriting Competition Stuck at Home Edition for your song Wash My Hands, encouraging safe practices during the pandemic. That was a very timely hit for you.
Definitely. I hadn't had my own child yet, actually. We were my whole family, we ended up quarantining in my parents' house in West Hartford, Connecticut, with my 18-month-old niece. And, it was a very traumatic time for all of us. And the only way I could really do music, besides for trying to call people on the phone, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever we could do, I had a ukulele, I had kids' instruments, I had my niece, and just started singing her songs, making up songs with her, and started coming up with some catchy things. So one thing led to another.
How did John Lennon get involved in this, having been gone now 40 some odd years?
So there's a John Lennon songwriting contest. It's amazing. And I think one of my other songs did get acknowledged this in 2023 from my last album, actually, as well. But they have an ongoing songwriter song contest for different genres, and they have a whole educational arm to it, and it's a really great organization, and the judges are really cool, and I've entered it a couple of times. But yeah, so it's in the spirit, all the writing is like in the spirit of John Lennon, I suppose, like for social change and all sorts of positive messages.
The world coming together for the greater good, right? That's the theme.
Exactly.
Yep. That's so cool. Well, this next song, according to Wikipedia, which of course knows everything, is one of the few by Irving Berlin that is autobiographical. His fiancée, named Ellen McKay, had been sent to Europe by a disapproving father, a very wealthy Long Island magnate, in the hopes that she would forget Irving Berlin. But she did not, and eventually they married. This song has been covered by Julie London, one of my favorites, Nancy Sinatra, even Harry Nilsson. Here's Allegra with What'll I Do?
What'll I do when you are far away and I am blue? What'll I do? What'll I do when I am wondering who is kissing you? What'll I do? What'll I do with just a photograph to tell my troubles to? When I'm alone with only dreams of you that won't come true, what'll I do? What'll I do with just a photograph to tell my troubles to? When I'm alone with only dreams of you that won't come true. What'll I do? What'll I do?
Wow.
Yeah. What is that instrument in the background? Is that a ukulele?
Yeah.
It is a ukulele. I know a lot of guitarists do not love the ukulele, but I'm a big fan of it because it's so accessible. You can just pick it up and you can learn something in a day. You know,
it is
which
quite
I think
portable.
It's super portable. I have mine right here, actually. A nice purple.
Oh, cute.
Uke. But I was going to play on it myself, but I had one of my dearest friends, Andrew Baird, who's a great guitar player and plays ukulele and banjo and a lot of other instruments, string instruments. I had him as a guest on this recording, and it was just a pleasure to play a little sweet duo with him.
It's a great, very subtle accompaniment to your voice. It's wonderful.
It's nice. I tend to have always been on the low end of things. And
but that song
it's
is
kind of
not.
nice to have the contrast.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Well, Allegra, thank you so much for talking with us. It's really a pleasure. And I'm so glad you took the opportunity, even though you're 34 weeks pregnant.
And I was looking for a name for your pie jazz club.
Oh,
Riff and sniff, nah. But how about Allegra a la mode?
ooh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're really encouraging me here. I mean, the thing about jazz clubs is that you always need a nice slice of pie
Yes.
when you're listening to jazz. There's no better dessert. So
All right. Well, just save me a slice when you open it up.
Yeah, I've been getting into savory pies lately, which is a whole subculture, underneath the regular fruit-based pies or cream pies or things like that. And it's just fascinating.
it's a whole different thing.
I mean, you start out with the gateway drug, which are the pies in the grocery store, and then you work your way until you're on a street corner one night going, got any pie? Got any pie?
All right. I'm getting hungry now.
Allegra, thanks a lot for talking with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 22,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Shelby Hockenberry. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Smooth Moves in Modernism edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.